The third practice in our journey to love is to practice being vulnerable. What does that mean? It means sharing your authentic thoughts and feelings with the people around you. But before you share, I'd like to invite you to learn and study nonviolent communication or compassionate communication, because that's a key ingredient to sharing your emotions and feelings and thoughts while owning them, without putting the responsibility on the other person. So practice being vulnerable is very different from dumping. So if you're in the heat of the emotion, do not share. That would be dumping. If you're still in trigger mode and you share, that's going to be dumping, and because you're going to be basically, whether you phrase it nicely or not, whether you're aggressive or passive aggressive, it's still going to be dumping, and it's not going to be beneficial for the relationship. But before you share or practice being vulnerable, there are a three-step process. The first step is to find your center. And in the first practice, which is Know Yourself and Own Your Power, we have a list of tools to bring us back to center. So go to that list and find feasible ways to bring yourself back to center. You might do some emotional release, movement, whatever you need to do to come back to center. Feeling the sensations in your body, talk to a friend, find ways to discharge the emotional trigger in a healthy way without suppressing it or numbing it or pretending it doesn't exist or acting it out on the person who triggered you. So the first step is to find your center. The second step is to ask for permission, because even though you might be in your center, the other person might not be in their center. They might not be ready to receive whatever you have to share. So it's extremely important to ask for permission, and if you get a no, then negotiate a time that works for both of you. And then the third step, which is to finally communicate using nonviolent communication. You can find lots of resources online to study nonviolent communication. But very briefly, I'm going to give you the formula that we usually use that keeps you in ownership of your emotions. So instead of saying, for example, you hurt my feelings, you can say something along the lines of, when such and such thing happened, I felt sad or angry or whatever emotion is true for you, because my need for XYZ was not met. I would like to ask something from you. So this way, you were describing objectively a situation, so they can clearly see the action that caused your trigger. So there's no projection, there's no story around what happened. You're basically stating the facts that happened, and then how those facts affected you. So again, you're owning your emotions. When this happened, I felt XYZ. Not you made me feel this. No, I felt XYZ. And then explain why. Because my need for connection, my need for understanding, my need for empathy, whatever it is, was not being met. And then you can ask for a different action, and they can say yes or no. It's totally up to them. But chances are, if you put it this way and you can let them get a glimpse of what's happening in your world, they're much more likely to cooperate with you than if you attack them and dump on them and put the blame on them. For example, you have a date with somebody and you go on time and the person doesn't show up. Let's say they're half an hour late. So you're feeling all the triggers and all the negative emotions and all the sadness and anger and frustration, and you find ways to bring back yourself to center. Maybe journal, write something down, or smell a flower, or look at the window, something that brings you back to center. And when your date arrives, you can, instead of saying, "You're late, you don't respect my time, what do you think I am?" and all that attack mode, you can say something in nonviolent communication or NVC. You can say something like, "When we agreed to meet at 7 and you arrived at 7:30, I felt sad and I felt a little bit of anger because my need for acknowledgement and connection and respect were not being met. Could I ask you please next time, if you're going to be late, to contact me to let me know that you're going to be a little late, and this way I can at least know that there's nothing wrong going on with you?" So that kind of reaction, that kind of communication is much more likely to increase the connection and the bond between you than the attack and the blaming and shaming game. Practicing being vulnerable is actually easier than you might think. I would encourage you to, for example, to start practicing with strangers, people that you'll never see again. For example, you see somebody in the grocery store and you like their shirt and say, "Oh, I like your shirt," or "I like your smile." Even if they don't react in a way that you expect, who cares? You're never going to see them again. But it's practicing that muscle of sharing vulnerably what's going on in your inner world and sharing it with people around you. And sometimes we might find ourselves thinking, "Oh, I'll never be able to say that," or "That's the last thing I can share with them." If the idea of sharing something scares you, that's exactly what you need to share. Because that fear attached to sharing is the energy, the loud cry, the energy that's trying to push this thing out. It's the loud cry of wanting to come out. So again, try to phrase it in nonviolent communication way, in compassionate communication, and then share it vulnerably with the person who you feel that you cannot share it with. When we drop our masks and share our truth vulnerably, we create a safe environment for others to do the same. In essence, we're encouraging them to embrace our and their own humanity. It's human nature to have feelings, needs, and desires. Instead of hiding our truth and pretending, what if we accepted and shared all of us? The fastest way to suffer is to fight nature. By sharing our fears and tears vulnerably, we are in essence embracing our nature, and therefore eliminating all the suffering that results from lies, pretenses, and shame. When we practice being vulnerable, chances are others will do the same. This will create more love, trust, understanding, and intimacy in our lives. And that's practicing being vulnerable. So start practicing with strangers, start with the small things, study NVC, find nonviolent communication groups where you can practice. It's like a new language. I truly believe that we should teach nonviolent communication in elementary schools and high schools, because that's going to change our culture tremendously by teaching people to own their power and be compassionate towards themselves and others. And that's the third practice towards our journey to love.